Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your natal Venus in the seventh house. The seventh house is the house of committed partnership. It's the house that Venus rules, by the way. And it's the house of all types of one-on-one relationships. It's the house of legal affairs, and I said committed partnerships. I should also say marriage because that's a big one. That is a committed partnership. But even like business partnerships too. And it's the house of public relations. So it's a house of you and somebody else. It's not, it opposes the first house of the self. So Libra and Libra's ruler Venus rule the seventh house, and the opposite sign of Libra, Aries, and its ruler Mars rules the first house. And Venus and Mars are the divine lovers, but they're opposing one another. Aries is in the first house of the self, or rules the first house of the self. So you can see the self versus the other. So when you have Venus in the seventh house, this can be really good for somebody who is interested in a romantic relationship. And you might say, well, isn't everybody interested in them? Not necessarily. Some people are very ambivalent. They're very torn between whether they truly want that type of relationship. They may be afraid to commit. And that's when you see people who are very, I wouldn't even describe it as promiscuous, because that's a slightly different thing of what I'm talking about. But the people who just get in one relationship and they get into another one, and they never seem to get to that part of the relationship where they are seriously committed to one another and thinking about spending the rest of their life together, or their lives together. And so you are definitely the kind of person that wants that committed partnership. And this becomes very interesting. Like, let's say your Venus sign is in Sagittarius, or if it's in Aries. These are two fire signs that are very adventurous and freedom loving. What if it's in Gemini? You might typically, if you read stuff about your Venus placement, you might say, your Venus sign placement in the sign of Gemini, or the other signs I mentioned, you might say, oh, well, I guess I'm doomed to not really want that type of relationship. But the truth is that you do. It's just that, you have to combine these influences, and it would make you look to an outside person who looks at, or who you tell what your Venus sign is. They might just assume that you're like footloose and fancy free and you don't want a committed relationship, but nothing could be further from the truth. You really are very wanting that kind of thing. And because you do want it so much, you have to remember that you have rights too, and that you have to be able to, that there has to be give and take, that you can't, just be the one who gives in all the time, because you might be that person. No matter what your sign of Venus is in, because it's in the seventh house, it has the sub-influence of Libra, which means that you're going to be that kind of person who is much more like in love of harmony than in creating, I was going to say upsetting the apple cart. That sounds like it's from the 1800s, that saying. But yeah, something like that. And that can be something that you're just like, no, I don't really want to be like this. I want to have, I don't want there to be conflict in my relationship. Well, that's life in the big city. Sometimes there is, and If, for instance, your Venus is in Pisces, you may have almost an unrealistic uh, ex, uh, you may have almost unrealistic expectations of what a relationship entails, like a good relationship, but also what it's supposed to be like, and that can lead you to maybe bail if the relationship doesn't uh, match up to what it is that you think it should be. Now, I shouldn't really say that, because I think that I don't think you would bail, to tell you the truth. I think that you'd be more likely to kind of um, hang in there. However, the reason I'm even bringing that up is I feel that, if your Venus sign is in Pisces, for instance, you are already going to be idealistic in love. And so it could be very disappointing if you're with someone who is not as committed as you. And it's funny, I think of John Lennon and Yoko, and how when they first were together, how they were attached to the hip, by the hip, with one another. And John Lennon was a Libra sun sign. He didn't have his Venus in Libra, but still, it really doesn't matter. Sometimes these things are interchangeable. You can definitely get sun sign Libra, moon sign Libra people who operate in this way, maybe even Mars in Libra sometimes, but Mars is a little tricky because it has like a certain type of influence that doesn't really favor some of the things that we're talking about. But yeah, you know what I mean? So, and because you guys, if you have Venus in Libra, for instance, you're really going to be, dedicated to being in a partnership. But the reason that that is a little bit tricky is that just because, I mean, you might be with someone who is into you, but they also want to do things as an individual. And that might not sit well with you, or it might make you insecure, even if you don't say anything to them and tell them that, you're not feeling that attitude. You still may give off this vibe that it's not okay, you don't like it, it makes you uncomfortable. So it might be something that you have to deal with. But definitely grow a backbone if you don't have one, because you may be inclined to kind of go along to get along in a relationship, and that would be a real bummer, because first of all, you wouldn't be authentic, but also you would be a pushover, and that other person, if they are targeting people who are very um, passive, you could say, they may take advantage of your good nature. You may marry somebody or couple with somebody who's got some bucks on them. Um, or maybe they're a looker. They're really attractive. They're a great dresser. The aesthetics that Libra represents. This is, like I said, this is like having Venus in Libra. And the pitfall of Venus in Libra is, to me, a superficial judgment of what makes a good partner by the person who possesses Venus in Libra. So the same could apply here. And God help you if you actually have Venus and Libra in the seventh house. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, sometimes people, even if they are spiritual enough, intelligent enough to know better, they and they may even, laugh about it with themselves, that they have a tendency to be attracted to attractive people. Now, that sounds like a no-brainer, but really, if somebody finds themselves falling in love with somebody because they're gorgeous. I was going to say that's just lame, but actually, that is a false um, value that they're placing, because the same thing can apply to someone who is turned on by somebody, who finds somebody physically attractive. I mean, kind of like more of a sexual thing, not just like, oh wow, this person is so beautiful or so handsome, or they have such great taste in clothing. Not that kind of thing, because that's not really about being turned on by somebody. That can be more of an aesthetic thing, where it's like you admire somebody because they have style, they have elegance. Because you may have it too, so you may be attracted to what you are all about yourself. But the problem is that some things can be packaged really well, and they can be really stinky. They're not really good things. So this is why people have to be careful about being superficial and thinking somehow that they are um, attracted to a person for the right reasons, because that isn't the right reason. On the other hand, I acknowledge that you can't be repelled by somebody. You really have to have some sort of attraction, even if it's not an unconventional appeal. You find that person appealing, and it's not really what we would typically look at in relationships for you to be attracted to a certain type of person. So it can be very interesting how it all plays out. Um, what I have seen and what I have read is that not only Venus but Jupiter, these are the two planets that, if they are in your chart, not you don't have to have both of them, but at least one of them, you may marry into money. And so in this case, this would also be the case, because it is one of these planets. And it can be a very harmonious union, by the way. I mean, I was acting like it's superficial, but that's not true. I'm just saying that you may be attracted to people for their physical appearance, or, how they dress and things like that, but they might actually be the right person for you. You also have your own I was going to say aura, but I don't know exactly the way that the way that you act is very charming, and people notice this. Again, like Venus in Libra, for instance, that could be another example of how that plays out. And this is because Venus is associated with, the charm factor, how much grace a person has. I was just laughing because I was thinking of Venus and Aries. The person may be like a bull in a china closet, or they might be very rough around the edges, like they're not really like refined necessarily. But that can have its own appeal to certain people who love that kind of primitive aura. But Venus in the seventh house, this is going to give somebody who's very refined. And that's because Venus also is associated with culture, pursuits in culture. When we say somebody is cultured, they know about art. They have that kind of background. And here on advancedastrology.com, they mention poetry and they separate it from art. Well, I would say that's an art form, so I'm a little bit surprised. But maybe they're afraid people think of like paintings or something. So anyway, Venus. I'm sorry. The seventh house is associated with public relations. Again, I'm assuming it's because Venus is about charm, and the seventh house can be those one-on-one relationships. So that could be like you being able to be interacting with the public in a way that's very gracious. And I when I was thinking of public relations, the first thing I thought about was somebody who is a PR person who kind of like is the spokesmodel or the spokesperson for a famous or a prominent person. But I think it's more than that. And seventh house is also legal affairs. So because Venus confers harmony, this can be things that work out in your favor. And but it has to be in particular if you don't have afflictions to Venus. In other words, hard angles. I think that when they talk about afflictions, it doesn't have to be that, if you have a couple of squares, that's going to just do you in. I think it would be like if it's just very pronounced that you have a lot going on that is challenging with your Venus contacts to other planets. That might be what it is. So you might even be a lawyer, and certainly with the sign of Libra, there seem to be people that really are attracted to the law, but whether it is in the legal profession, remember it's not just lawyers, but paralegals are also. I think though that with lawyers, they're coming before the public, and the seventh house can be your public. They also mention counseling, and the only thing I can say about that is I would say like mediation in particular, because that is where you're looking at both sides and you're able to kind of, come up with something like that. And the sign of Libra is the sign that can see all sides of an argument, which is why, Libra individuals are so well suited for being lawyers, where they have to take on cases where they might have to they might have to defend someone who, is in a very difficult situation, but they have to see that person's point of view to be able to defend them. So anything where you're kind of inviting diplomacy is right up your alley with this placement. Watch out for being too attached to being in relationship. Maybe you find it hard to be alone. Even in business partnerships, you probably will function better when you are working with somebody else rather than going it alone. But and that may make sense in the business world, but in your private life, if you always have to have a relationship, who knows? Maybe you would tolerate a relationship that is not really um, as good as it should be. So, and also feeling like having a relationship means that you are okay, that having somebody um, who you feel loves you because they're in a relationship with you means that you're lovable. You know, you don't want to get caught up in that false belief. So, anyway, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.